Hello everyone and welcome to Our Ventura TV. I'm your host today, Sandra Siepak, and we want to welcome to our show Mr. Joe Moreno. He is an author of the book Catch of the Day, and we want to welcome you to our show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This book is quite compelling, Joe, I must tell you. It's the story about the USS Louisiana, which is a U.S. ballistic missile sub. And boy, is that quite a story. It disappears in the Persian Gulf, and I just have to know how you came about to write this.
Well, ironically, I never intended to write about a ballistic missile submarine. I was going to write about the Somali pirates. They were capturing larger and larger ocean-going vessels, and when they captured an Ukrainian freighter that had dozens of Russian tanks on it and other weapons, I thought, well, finally, I've got to write a story about this. So my thought process was, what would be the biggest prize the Somali pirates could capture? And the first thing that came to mind was like a luxury cruise liner that would have like high-value passengers, say a Saudi prince or princess on board. But when I thought that through, that would just turn out to be another hostage ransom story like so many others. So then I thought about an aircraft carrier. But they always travel, they always have an escort, a battle group with other warships and usually at least one attack submarine. So that would be pretty hard for them to do. So then the next thing was a ballistic missile submarine. And they travel alone. They're very stealthy. But the problem is the Somali pirates wouldn't be capable of even finding one of these submarines, let alone capturing it. So then it changed from the Somali pirates to Rashad and his men. And when I did that, the story changed, completely went into a different direction.
And the book really is very interesting, the way that you've written it and the way that you put these characters together. Was there a reason that you came to write this? Did you have something personal in writing this that brought the story out for you?
Well, I've kind of always been a believer in the golden rule and how you treat other people. You should treat them the way you would like to be treated. And what happens in the story is it's essentially an anti-war story, because if you take a look at our foreign policy and how we treat other countries, a lot of times if we would treat them the way we'd like them to treat us, we could avoid a lot of the conflicts that we're involved in. And what happens with this submarine is we're forced to take a look at our foreign policy to see if there isn't a better way to do it so that we don't create so many problems.
Well, this is a very large sub. This is a 560-foot sub. This is a major ship that's in the ocean here. It has 24 missiles on it with 8 nuclear warheads each. That's a pretty scary thought.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, is this something that people should know more about? Should they be more aware of what submarines are doing?
Well, in the
waters today?
Well, yeah, in addition to it being an anti-war story, it's also a cautionary tale about nuclear weapons, because we may be in the possession of these weapons at one point, but there's always a possibility that something could happen and they're no longer in our possession. And if the wrong people have them.
Absolutely, and in the story, I don't want to give away too much of the book because we want people to read it for themselves. But the story is that the sub is captured by the Iranians. And what they do and what they demand when they get a hold of this sub is quite unique. There's some demands they make. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Well, yeah. There's 3 demands. And in this story, 2 of them are addressed. The 3rd demand would be saved for the sequel. And the first demand is they're going to evict us from the Middle East. Our military bases, our war machines, our soldiers, they're going to force us out. And so, and then demand 2, of course, demand 2 also with our other warships in the Persian Gulf, they're also required to leave the area.
So how did you get the idea to put this whole story together? I know that in addition to being an author, you're a screenwriter. So you have a little bit of a knack for doing this, creating scripts and putting stories together. But what really made you put this particular story together?
Well, like I said, I wasn't really going to start out with that. It was going to be the Somali pirates, but then when I ended up going to the submarine, it had to be somebody different, and the pirates could no longer do it. So the only ones that could do it in the Persian Gulf would be the Iranians,
Okay.
would be the logical people to do it. And so that was how it turned to there. And part of my problem is, as much as we love this country, there are some times when our foreign policy may be more damaging than good. Some of the things that we do may create more problems than they solve.
Okay.
And it's not always, the other guys are not always the bad guy. And we're not always the good guy. And sometimes we need to take a step back and take a look at it and say, is there maybe a better way to do this so that we don't get into so many conflicts where we're getting involved in wars and in military actions? And that's kind of what this is. And it benefits everybody if you follow the golden rule, both sides, the other guys and us, we end up benefiting from it mutually.
Now, in writing this particular book, I'm sure you had to do quite a bit of research and really kind of dig deep to get a lot of your facts and things like that for the book. Tell me how that worked out, and where did you have to go to get a lot of this done?
Yes, it's kind of interesting because I was computer illiterate at the time I wrote the book. I had never touched a computer in my life. And there were so many aspects to the story about the weapons system, defense, military, the Security Council, the Situation Room, the tank in the Pentagon, and NORAD. All this had to be, I had to research all this. And I literally spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours researching this. And since I didn't have a computer, I had to do it from all other aspects. And fortunately, at the time I was writing this, the Discovery Channel, the History Channel, and National Geographic did a lot of specials on the Middle East, and so I collected information from there. I went to the library, to the encyclopedias, and got the overall view of a lot of these different subjects. The newspaper articles I cut out and also added those to it. And then there's a volume called Jane's Fighting Ships. And Jane's not a woman, it's a guy's last name who was a former military officer.
Okay.
And he's got these huge volumes of the military and the ships, of the weapons on them, the size and all that. So I put all these things together, and it was kind of overwhelming at first. In fact, I almost gave up on it. But as I put it together piece by piece, then they all started to go together like this, and it was beautiful. I mean, all these pieces came together, and now the people who have read it are amazed by what they're reading.
Do you hear from people who have read the book, and do they voice an opinion about it, or do they tell you anything of what they thought of it, or what are some of the comments that you hear?
Well, years ago when I was writing screenplays, I wanted to pay somebody professional to critique it, somebody who knew writing to critique the story. So I think it was in The Breeze, they had an ad in the back, somebody who does editing and whatever. So I contacted this person, and turns out she originally, or one time she worked in Hollywood. She actually read screenplays for Universal Studios or Universal Pictures, and then she moved into production. So I thought, well, that's perfect. She read screenplays, I'll pay her to critique it, and then I'll take and write a final draft. Well, I did that with this individual over a period of 10 years with several different stories. When I took Catch of the Day to this person, after she had gone through it, she called me and said, Joe, you want to come over? I'm ready with the critique.
Okay, good.
That's when this lady, after knowing her for 10 years, that's when she told me she was a former CIA agent. And she said what I did was absolutely brilliant and compelling. And that's what she put in the critique. She wrote that. But when we were done, she personally said to me, and this is a quote, "Thank you for letting me be a part of this." That's how extraordinary this story is.
It is an extraordinary part.
It is.
Yeah.
And my intellectual property attorney, this woman is a bright lady. I mean, she was a research and development chemist. And then part of her job required that she studied other companies' patents to make sure they didn't infringe on them. Well, she found patent work fascinating, so she went into intellectual property law. She read the screenplay. When she called me, her first 3 words were, "Oh my gosh." She was blown away by what was in this story. In fact, so much so that she wants to work on the sequel with me. I mean, it's an incredible story. And
what do you hope people take away after they read it? Do you think they'll be a little bit more well-informed about what our government is doing, especially being overseas and with some of the things that are happening in the world today with terrorism? Do you really feel that people will take away a little bit more knowledge after they read your story?
Well,
Catch of the Day really goes pretty far in and talks a lot about some of the things that people may not quite know a lot about. So what would you say to that?
Well, some of the dialogue that comes from the other side, the Iranians, when the captain does the video on board the ship, when he's doing and the sailors are in the background, from that dialogue, it's actually from them that they don't use the term golden rule, but they do ask, how would you like it if? And then they go into a number of different things. And if you stop and they're courageous enough to answer the question that he's asking, how would you like it if, and then so forth, that makes you think, well, how would we feel if these certain conditions?
Yeah, if you were put in that position.
And it's so potent, that's why these people were blown away by it. Says, wow, look what he's doing here. And it really does put goosebumps on you.
So you really relied a lot on your research to bring the story to life, so to speak. And all that compiling of research really gave the story a real rough edge to it so that people really learn. There's a lot that goes through the story of the book that you can really be a lot more informed about. And I think that's something that's very, very interesting about the book. You don't know these things are going on until you read that story.
Yeah.
And that's a scary thought.
When I first wrote it, when I started writing, I still thought NORAD was in Cheyenne Mountain, and it's not. It's at Peterson Air Force Base. But if you want to make a story believable, it sounds pretty incredible on the surface. You say a ballistic missile submarine disappears, and this happens, this happens.
Right.
If you want credibility, most people are going to say, well, you couldn't do that, you couldn't do this. So you have to go through the steps to show, yeah, you can, and this is how you do it. And be able to do what I did, you have to research all these pieces and then put them together, and pretty soon, that's where the goosebumps come.
Yeah, and I think when through the story, the world has never witnessed anything like this book, and the compelling story that it tells. And I think people will be a little on edge after reading this book. They'll be like, wait a minute, I didn't know this could really happen. Yeah. Because you think we're so well protected, and yet there's just that little slight edge to it that people will learn a lot about.
Yeah, and like this lady who turned out was a former agent.
Sure.
She used the word brilliant.
Right.
And she put it in writing.
That must make you feel good as an author.
Yeah, but I knew after I started working into the story, it started putting goosebumps on me quite a ways in. I said, oh my gosh, what have I done? Because I'm actually showing that it can be done. You can't say, well, you can't do that. You can, and this is how you do it. And how did I, as a janitor, I've been a janitor for 45 years.
Oh gosh.
That's what I do for a living.
Really? So
I'm a janitor who was computer illiterate when I wrote this at 62 years old, and yet I'm blowing people away because of what I did, because I've always had this creative flow and things. And even a guy I knew, when I worked at the missionary school, I worked there as a janitor for the school for 5 years. And one of the guys that used to come in, he was a member of the church, and he was also come in with the basketball players at the gym, which I overseen. And he knew about my other scripts, and he liked them. When he read this one, Catch of the Day, he knew how honest I was, because he knew I'd turn in all this and stuff and whatever I found there. But he said, did you really write this? And I've got a box of handwritten where I went through, and he knew I did, but it's like, how did you do this?
Yeah, because in the story, you really find out that a sub is a real potent war machine. This is a real piece of machinery down there that we can really, really count on. And it can change the course of many lives.
Well, what's so scary about it, is you had mentioned about the missiles, but there are 24 Trident II missiles. Each missile has 8 warheads. That's 192 warheads, but each warhead is 475 kilotons. That's 30 times the Hiroshima blast. So those 192 warheads are the equivalent of 7,000 Hiroshima bombs. And each missile that has the 8 warheads, each warhead is independently targetable. You can program each warhead to go to 8 different targets from that one missile.
Well, Joe, I have to tell you, this is a great read for many people, and if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what does go on with our security and national security out there protecting us all today, I think you'll get a good read out of Catch of the Day. It's a wonderful book, and for readers who are interested, how can they find it?
Just research it online under both Catch of the Day, the title, and by my name, Joe A. Moreno, M-O-R-E-N-O.
Good.
Catch of the Day.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Joe. We appreciate your time being here and telling us a little bit more about the background behind the book. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much.
And thank all of you for joining us today on Our Ventura TV. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.